Hello everyone, this is Andrew at Crown Academy of English. Today we are doing a vocabulary lesson and we're going to discuss expressing preferences. So here is a structure that we use to describe preferences. So the structure is the verb prefer and then a noun phrase, then the preposition to, and then another noun phrase. And this means to like something more than something else. So we like the first noun phrase more than the second noun phrase. So let's have a look at an example. I prefer coffee to tea. I prefer coffee to tea. So this means that I like coffee more than tea. So I like this first noun phrase more than the second noun phrase. So notice the preposition to. Another example. I prefer rice to pasta. So this means that I like rice more than pasta. I prefer reading to writing. So notice that in this example, the grammar of this sentence is that reading and writing, we call these words gerunds. Okay, so they are in fact verbs, but we are using them as nouns. Okay, so the ing form here, reading and writing, although they are verbs, we are using the verbs like nouns. So they are in fact noun phrases. I prefer reading to writing. So I like reading more than writing. And another example in the third person singular, Mark prefers watching TV to listening to the radio. So here we have two noun phrases which have a gerund as part of them. So Mark prefers this activity to this activity. So he likes watching TV more than listening to the radio. Okay? Notice in all of these examples, the verb is in the present simple form. And that is because we are discussing facts. We are discussing the fact that about our preferences. So it's a habit, it's a fact, something that always happens. Another structure which is very useful is would prefer plus infinitive. And we use this to describe present and future preferences. I would prefer to go to New York. I would prefer to go to New York. So we have the structure here, would prefer, followed by the infinitive. So remember, the infinitive of a verb is to plus the base form of the verb. So here we have the infinitive form of the verb go, which is to go. I would prefer to go to New York. And we can also have a contracted form of this structure. I'd prefer to go to New York. I'd prefer to go to New York. So we have contracted the two words I and would, we have contracted them into I'd, apostrophe D. So here is another example. Mark proposes, let's get a taxi. But Jane replies, I'd prefer to walk. I'd prefer to walk. So I'd is I would, prefer, followed by the infinitive of walk, to walk. The negative form, Jane says, I'd prefer not to get a taxi. I'd prefer not to get a taxi. So notice the position of the word not. It comes after prefer and before the infinitive. Okay? So not it's not here, it goes here. So it's after prefer and before the infinitive. And the question form, Mark asks, would you prefer to walk? Would you prefer to walk? And we have another longer structure, would prefer plus infinitive plus rather than plus the base form of verb. So what does this mean? Well, we use this to want to do one thing more than another thing. So we are comparing two activities and we are saying that we like or would like to do one thing more than the other. And again, it is in the present or the future. I would prefer to go to New York rather than go to Los Angeles. I would prefer to go to New York rather than go to Los Angeles. So we have would prefer followed by the infinitive, which always has the word to, so to go. Then we have the words rather than, so that never changes. But then look carefully here, the base form of the verb, but without the word to in front of it. So this is not the infinitive, it is simply the base form of the verb. Rather than go to Los Angeles. Another example. Jane says, I'd prefer to walk rather than get a taxi. So we have the contracted form of would prefer, I'd prefer. To walk is the infinitive. Rather than, it never changes. Okay, so we are comparing now. And here we have the base form of the verb get, which is get. So I would prefer to walk rather than get a taxi. So Jane is saying, I'd like to walk more than get a taxi. Okay, she doesn't want to get a taxi, she wants to walk. We have another structure, would prefer, followed by object pronoun, followed by infinitive. So this is slightly different. Here we are describing our preferences for the actions of another person. Okay, so this is important. We are talking about another person in the present or the future. So we used an object pronoun to refer to the other person. Let me give you an example. I would prefer him to drive. I would prefer him to drive. Okay, so it is me, I am the subject, but we are talking about somebody else. Okay, we're talking about somebody else. I would prefer him to drive. Okay, I don't want to drive. I would prefer him to drive. So him is the other person. So notice when we describe the other person, we use an object pronoun. We do not use a subject pronoun. The subject pronoun would be I would prefer he to drive. No, that is wrong. We must use an object pronoun, him. A negative form is I would prefer her not to drive. I would prefer her not to drive. So the word not comes after the object pronoun and before the infinitive, to drive. I would prefer her not to drive. Okay, so this means I would not like her to drive. I would prefer him to drive, for example. I would like somebody else to drive, but not her. Okay? The question form, would you prefer me to drive, for example? Would you prefer me to drive? Or we could say, would you prefer him to drive? Or would you prefer her to drive? Okay? So again, this is the object pronoun. We do not say, would you prefer I to drive? Because I is the subject pronoun. It's the same here. In the negative, we would say, I would prefer her not to drive. Her is the object pronoun. But we do not say, I would prefer she not to drive, because she is the subject pronoun. Okay? So there are three common mistakes when describing preferences. So this is the first one. I would prefer read. So why is this wrong? Well, here is the correct version. I would prefer to read. So the verb prefer takes the infinitive. Okay, it doesn't take the base form. This is the base form, but we must have a proper infinitive. Second mistake, I prefer coffee than tea. So why is this wrong? Well, this is the wrong word. Here is the correct version. So when we are comparing two things, then we use the preposition to. I prefer coffee to tea. And this is wrong. This is the third very common mistake. I'd prefer to walk than get a taxi. So this is wrong. And the correct version is I'd prefer to walk rather than get a taxi. Rather than get a taxi. So we must have the word rather. This is a very common mistake particularly from speakers of other European languages, because this is often how they say it in several European languages. Okay? So don't forget, in proper good English, we must say rather than, followed by the base form of the verb. Okay? So that is the end of the lesson. Would you like an online English lesson? Maybe to practice your English speaking, or perhaps to prepare for an English exam? If so, then you can click here on the screen for prices and more information.